Yemen isn't, or definitely the Houthis aren't one of our allies. We have no relationship with Ansar Allah, and now with Trump back in office, they're back to being a terrorist organization. And I think it speaks to the same point in terms of the Houthis, that the Houthis are able to launch a dozen projectiles at Israel in a single week. And as you mentioned, trying to maximize civilian casualties with having cluster bombs attached to them. Israel's different, where Israel can hold their own. America, I mean, what more would you want from a country who's killing your enemies?
What's up, everyone? I have a very special guest today, Eyal Yakoby, very talented young man. He's been on CNN, Washington Post, and Fox News. And he was one of the Republican leaders at UPenn. And Elon Musk loves tweeting his content. And I want to start out by talking about Qatari financing in our country, the Qatari lobby, as also what's going on here in New York City with Mamdani and the economy. I want to start off here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Welcome, man. And so, I know you're a big advocate of speaking up about Qatar. The Qatar lobby's been paying lobbyists. Would you say that we have corruption in Washington coming from Qatar?
I think it depends on how you define corruption per se. Is obviously there's going to be foreign lobbies that operate in the U.S. just like we commit espionage against other countries. But I think the difference is that with the Qataris, it's not out in the open. It's very hush-hush, it's very hidden, and it's done in a manner that's different than other countries, where it might not come up on, for instance, FARA documents as acting as an agent. And so with the Qataris, it's much more soft power than hard power, than actually buying off politicians, companies, etc. It's much more soft power of them putting investments into significant, different, let's call them U.S. assets. And what I mean by that is universities, institutions, sports teams. And someone has to ask at a certain point is why? Why put in so much money? And so in terms of your question, that's more where I think the corruption leads, is just asking the question, why do they feel the need to pour so much money into certain institutions in the United States?
Yeah, because I know you're pretty outspoken about what Qatar is doing in Washington. They seem to have several politicians, right?
Yeah,
former politicians lobbying.
Like under I'm blanking on his name, but the former head of the Department of Education is now a registered lobbyist for Qatar. Like actually submitted the FAIR documentation to represent the Qataris. And Qatar is a special ally of the United States. But I think what people miss is that at the end of the day, it is a dictatorship. The Al Thani family, while it seems like they're trying to reform, are still Islamists. They still believe in political Islam. And there's a reason that countries like the Saudis 6 years ago were banning Qatar. The Saudis actually cut all relations with Qatar. And so you have to ask yourself, if a country like Saudi Arabia cut ties with Qatar not too long ago, what is their true intention? And I don't want to answer that question, but I do want to ask that question and hear answers as to what sort of reforms have they made? Because we know during the World Cup, for instance, they use slave labor. What sort of internal reforms are they doing where we can actually track that cash and see where that cash is being used? Because we know for a fact that a lot of it, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of Republican congressmen that are former Republican congressmen that are now registered agents of Qatar, meaning they lobby on behalf of Qatar. Perfect example, who's not a congressman, but I believe it was chief of staff, someone high up in Lindsey Graham's office, who's considered to be a war hawk, extremely pro-Israel, is now a registered agent of Qatar. At the same time, you have people like Ilhan Omar, who got a fully expensed trip to go to the Qatari World Cup and stayed in the nicest hotel there. You have the same thing that happened with Jasmine Crockett. And so the question is, why are you funding both sides of the political aisle? And how do the values of Qatar, where there's restrictions on women, where it's criminal to be part of the LGBTQ plus community, where there's limits on free speech, you're not allowed to criticize the Al Thani family or Islam, why are those same people funding the far left, which should disagree with, criminalizing being gay? And why are they funding the right, which should stand up for free speech? And so it's an interesting dynamic at play that doesn't really make any sense. And I think that's what's most concerning about it, is that it doesn't make sense, which to me means that there must be something below the surface.
Yeah, so I think the former congressman with Jim Moran, Tom McMillan, Tom Davis, and Tom Rock Reynolds that you pointed out, they were there to lobby Congress and polish its image. You said it was all of the Qatar solidarity. It's bought and paid for. And it's amazing if they're paying $80,000 a month to former congressmen in the United States who are supposed to be America first. You know, here we are in New York. Tomorrow is an anniversary of 9/11, where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind architect of 9/11, who was not a Zionist, last I checked, was hiding for years in Qatar. Literally hiding for years in Qatar. And then when the FBI was going to apprehend him, Qatar, our friend, tipped him off. And I think as long as the Qatari financiers, the royal family, Al Tahini, as long as they're able to finance and send money to terrorists, and they're protected and shielded by American military bases, they just can keep going because no one's going to hold them accountable. The United Nations down the street has 22 Arab countries. They're not gonna hold him. They're not gonna put any pressure. There's no international body that's gonna hold them accountable. In the United States, if you finance terror, you go to prison. But they can just finance as much terrorism as they want, and as long as they're held accountable, then they can just keep doing it. So when Israel goes in and they make that attack on Qatari soil, what other choice can they have? And then they say, "Oh, there's no international law." No, duh. Israel just already has acknowledged there's no international law. As the Israelis knew there was no international law on October 8th. They've been knowing there's no international law. There is no fair. There's not even a point to go to the United Nations. It's so hostile to the United States and Israel. So it's like, you also made a point once I saw it, and I'd love you to talk about it, man. It's Yemen has indiscriminately, viciously, with complete intention to kill, murder as many innocent civilians in the state of Israel as they possibly can, has been launching missiles at Israel for months. I haven't heard one person get pissed off about that. But Israel attacks a couple terrorists, Hamas, literally Hamas, that also killed Americans. And Israel has broken international law. What do you think?
I don't want to get in an argument about international law because I actually don't know if the strikes against Qatar do violate international law. I am of the belief, and I'm very confident, that the Qataris knew about the strike in advance and the United States knew about the strike in advance. There's no way that the U.S. didn't know about the strike in advance. The U.S. has one of its most important military bases. We know that they can shoot down things like ballistic missiles because of Iran launching ballistic missiles at Qatar 3 months ago. And there's no way Israel would risk F-35s, the U.S. thinking that there's hostile aircrafts in the airspace and the U.S. launch it. I mean, there's some level of military cooperation that needed to occur when you have an active U.S. base and there's 12 F-35s that are flying over the airspace. So I don't buy any of the media reporting. I think it's all smoke and mirrors that the U.S. didn't know about it and the Qataris didn't know about it. And I think anyone with an ounce of common sense could agree with that. In terms of the Yemen ballistic missiles, I mean, it's a different conversation because Yemen isn't, or definitely the Houthis aren't one of our allies. We have no relationship with Ansar Allah, and now with Trump back in office, they're back to being a terrorist organization. Biden removed it, not sure why. But I think what it more speaks to is this notion that's being developed in the West of self-hatred and constantly blaming our allies and never our enemies for anything. It's this new form of Orientalism that's happening on the right, where it's viewing people who aren't our allies, bad actors, as having no agency over their actions. And I think it plays in a bunch of different arenas, whether it be Russia launching drones at Poland yesterday and having NATO aircrafts over Polish airspace and, being literal inches away from issuing Article 5. I haven't heard any condemnations from the same people who so loudly say that Ukraine doesn't want peace say a word about Russia launching drones at Poland. And I think it speaks to the same point in terms of the Houthis, that the Houthis are able to launch a dozen projectiles at Israel in a single week. And as you mentioned, trying to maximize civilian casualties with having cluster bombs attached to them. And you don't hear the UN say a word. You don't hear Mark Carney say a word. You don't hear Keir Starmer say a word. But once Israel responds, then it's, we want to de-escalate tensions. And I think actually a better example, I know I'm rambling, is specific to the IRGC planning terrorist attacks in Australia against the Jewish community. And it was such an obvious double standard. Double standard doesn't even go to cover it. But you had the IRGC, which is not a terrorist organization in the UK. There's still an active Islamic Republic of Iran embassy in London, plotting terrorist attacks in Australia against Australian Jews. You didn't hear Keir Starmer say a word about it. But you hear Keir Starmer put out condemnations about Israel targeting Hamas leadership in Qatar. It just makes, it literally makes zero sense to the point where it's so infuriating. And I don't understand why in the West we've become almost immune to this notion of actually holding bad actors accountable and standing with our allies. Our allies are going to mess up. Maybe they'll go too far. But the double standards that are at play, where we're just constantly self-criticizing and never actually looking at the alternatives, it's pure insanity to me.
You know what? So how do you think America benefits from supporting Israel and having a foot in the Middle East?
I mean, I think it's multi-layered, and I think again you have to talk about comparables. Is we give foreign aid to tons of different countries. I mean, the foreign aid that we provide Israel is less than 1% of our total federal budget. So the fact that it occupies 95% of the conversation about reducing the debt makes zero sense whatsoever. Now, in terms of how Israel specifically helps the United States, I think the primary way is through intelligence. There's a level that we just can't see. That there's a level that we don't know how many terrorist attacks Israeli intelligence have stopped. That's an intangible value placed. What's the value that you would place? Let's say there's a terrorist attack in the US, it kills 10 people. What's the price that you're willing to pay for the intelligence that would stop the killing of those 10 people? To me, it's invaluable. So number one is intelligence. I think every person in the world can agree there's no one better than the Israelis at intelligence. The second way, and this point doesn't get spoken about enough, is when you look at how the aid packages to Israel work, it's not just a blank check, spend this on whatever you want. It's specific. I think 95% you have to buy American weapons. And the American weapons that they're buying are also the older versions of the weapons. So it's more clearing out our warehouses than just taking whatever Israel wants. And then the third way is you also have, Israel is almost a model ally when you think about it. Is when we look at our other allies, America's always actually had to step in when they're at war. They've actually had to look at Korea, look at Vietnam, look at all the conflicts where America's physically had boots on the ground. It's always on behalf of a foreign nation. Israel's different, where Israel can hold their own. America, what more would you want from a country who's killing your enemies? I mean, the amount of bounties that Israel could collect from the U.S. based off of killing Nasrallah and all the other terrorists that they've killed in just the past 2 years alone. And America never had to even risk a single American soldier to kill all these most wanted enemies. And so I think Israel is honestly a model ally, is that they can hold their own. They don't ask America for American boots on the ground. They don't dictate terms to America. They say, we can handle this, but we just need either the weaponry or we need other sorts of let's call it collusion to actually figure out the target and execute on that target. And I think, a perfect example is the 12-day war. Trump's been making the same point since 2011. No nukes for Iran. Israel was the one who risked their fighter jets, their soldiers, their tax dollars. People act like Israelis aren't paying into the system of killing the West's enemies. And then the U.S. finished the job with flying the B-2 bombers, which didn't risk the pilots, and finishing the job. And I think that's a perfect partnership in my mind, a perfect partnership.
Have you been to Israel?
Yes.
No. So you were born in the United States? So you're Jewish?
Yeah.
And when you go to Israel and you're with the Jews and you see a Christian, do you spit on them?
This is the dumbest. I know you're being facetious because people say this, but obviously not. I don't know where this stupidity comes from.
So you've never seen that?
I've never seen that.
Would you say Christian people are welcome in the state of Israel?
Yeah, of course. I've been on flights with Christian groups to Israel and traveled around with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I when I see Christians in Israel, I feel like they're very welcomed.
I don't even.
There's Christian people in the country that are citizens.
I don't think it's the notion of like welcomed. I think it's just the notion of they exist in Israel, just like Jews exist in Israel, just like Muslims exist in Israel. I don't think there's any notion of welcoming. And then you have these, viral videos that go out of some extremist Jewish child spitting on a Christian. And what I always get confused about is that you'll remember in San Francisco last month, there was a priest who literally got surrounded by a group of Antifa members and beaten by them. You have priests across the country being arrested for preaching the gospel. But does anyone take that video and then say it's does anyone really think that Christians aren't welcomed in American society because we have a few extremists in American society? And so this notion of like taking a single video and just acting like that's representative of Israeli society, it's the most low IQ notion of we live in an age of censorship, but we've gotten out of it where everyone says, like, if you're not allowed to talk about something, it's true. Anyone who thinks that Christians aren't welcome in Israel, ask yourself why there are certain actors and forces that are trying their very best to prevent you from flying to Israel. If anyone thinks that you're not welcome in Israel, just fly to Israel and see for yourself if you're welcome or not. It's a very simple solution. What we see time and time again is that when, whether it be the interviews with Netanyahu, where then there's an entire storm of people trying to cancel that person for conducting an interview, or there's trips like there was one 2 weeks ago with a bunch of influencers to fly to Israel, and they were all sent death threats, attacked. I mean, it was crazy. I was talking to them. The amount of death threats they received was truly insane, and to scare more people from going, because those people went. They obviously had a great time. Why wouldn't they? They were obviously welcomed. And so then it just shatters this entire narrative that's being presented. And so if anyone thinks that you're not welcome in Israel because you're not Jewish, just fly to Israel and see for yourself. There's no point in me convincing you when you can just take a flight and see for yourself.
I think there was I think that was an operation where after the group of Christians went to Israel, maybe there was like $1 million invested to discredit and shame them and taunt and harass them. It serves a few purposes. One purpose is that it's psychological warfare. They're discrediting them, and then also, like you said, they're serving as an example to others what can come. You're going to get threatened. They control the narrative like a heckler. The problem is, man, we're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party and Qatar, Iran, Russia, and they can't beat the United States and Israel in a military theater. So they go and they put millions of dollars into this psychological warfare, man. And it's working. They're getting such a great ROI. It's like their returns are like Warren Buffett right now. Like they're like an outstanding hedge fund manager. The way they've divided us, manipulated us, dumbed down our population. You go to China, on their Chinese, they don't even have the TikTok military app we do here. They're building strong people. They don't have a diversity quota in China. They just don't play that game, right? Or Europe, look at Europe. We got Dirty Sanchez, the leader of Spain. People are furious. The local Spanish people are furious. Their country's getting invaded. Their economy's horrendous. People are having a very tough period right now in Spain. I've noticed so many Spaniards want new leadership. And that's the entry point, just like Ukraine's an entry point. Ukraine's an entry point for the commies, and Spain's an entry point for the terrorists to come in, the migrants. I have a home in Germany, and I see it. One of the biggest maybe mistakes that they made was letting in too many Syrians. And now they're paying the price. And I think Canada maybe is making the same mistake in the last several years. They just opened the floodgate. And you have someone like Mark Carney, hopefully Pierre Poilievre wins. They kicked him out. Hopefully he comes back and he gets a W. But we're in a tough situation. I want to talk a little. I know we got a little bit of time here, so when we get onto the economy and then Mamdani, in regards to the economy, what are your thoughts on it for New York City in particular, and how it's going to look with Mamdani?
The New York City economy?
Yeah.
I think the city's doing fine right now. I think people are overly critical about the state of the United States of America. I think there's tons of opportunity. Employment's never been lower. I think the cost of living is a little bit too high. But I think at the same time, I think people just want to live in certain places. And that's just supply and demand at the end of the day. You have beautiful up and coming cities across the United States that anyone can move to. If you can't afford New York, move down to Charleston, move down to Austin, Texas. These are incredible American cities that are up and coming with a ton of opportunity. I think the issue in terms of the affordability crisis is that everyone just wants to live in a certain place, and there should be more housing. No one's saying there shouldn't be. But at the same time, I think there's this over critique of the current state in the United States. It has never been a better time to live in this country. In terms of your access to leading edge technology, your access to access to healthcare has gotten a little bit worse, but that's only because there's also been insane scientific innovations. If we talk about the comparable healthcare that you're able to access, and then education, you have more choices. I just think overall, I think there's an over self-critique of the state of America right now. The middle class has never been bigger in terms of percentage of this country. The country's doing well. We just like to criticize it, which we should to make it better. But
it's optimistic view, man.
I think it's just I'm not phrasing my words well, because it's just, I think a big part of this is that we're thrown so much agitation and propaganda is that it's hard to actually consume it all at once and actually understand logically how everything works. But in terms of the economy and the quality of life in America, it's never been a better time to be an American than it is right now. And no one can give me another state and another time in America where it's a better time to be an American. It simply doesn't exist.
If Mamdani's able to get away with openly condemning chants like globalize the Intifada, how do you think he's able to do that and still have such a lead?
I think people are uneducated. When I speak to people about Zoran Mamdani, they just don't really understand his policy positions. They understand a vision, but they don't understand how he's going to actually reach that goal. And they also don't understand his dark past because the media's had a complete blackout on it. In terms of globalize the Intifada phrase, I understand that's the one that's kind of made headlines that everyone focuses on. But if you really want to talk about, him condoning or commending terrorism, he literally released a song in 2017 describing the Holy Land 5 as my love. During the Arab Spring, he tweeted it, taking the side of the Muslim Brotherhood. There's so many more examples for his open support for terrorism and Islamism than just this notion of to globalize the Intifada. He hung out with Hassan Piker, who said America deserved 9/11. And so I just think New Yorkers are very naive because they see someone who's well-spoken. He's clearly smart. He's clearly a great marketer. And they don't actually understand his genuine policy positions because his vision is great. His vision is free education, free healthcare, free housing. If you can't afford something, you'll be able to afford something. Who wouldn't accept that? That's a great vision. But that's just not how the world works. And that's what I think people don't understand.
I just want to say a quick break to do a special thank you to the sponsor, 1-800-Accountants. Some of you may have heard about the big, beautiful bill. It lets small businesses write off 100% of new equipment, but at the same point, it may raise your borrowing costs. Do you think getting these tax breaks is going to help you, with a higher cost of loans? Do you know how to do the proper filing in your state, federal filings? Do you know how to save money with your taxes? Are you up to date with your filings? If you want help breaking all this stuff down, visit 1-800-Accountants. They make accounting and taxes simple, professional, and give you solutions so you don't have to do it alone. So recently, a new Saudi report says that Hamas leaders were seriously injured, and they were getting treated at an unknown location in Qatar. You said this. But an earlier report said that they had escaped the strike because they left for prayer. So why do you think there was a discrepancy between these two reports?
I mean, I think I don't know when this is going to air. I'm confident that when it does, we will know for a fact that the Hamas leaders were taken out. I think there's multiple reasons. I think number one is the only reason that we don't think so is because Hamas is denying it. Hamas also denied that Mohammed Def was taken out, that Abu Ubaidah was taken out, that Mohammed Sinwar was taken out, that Ismail Haniyeh wasn't taken out. So I give zero credence to Hamas's word on whether or not their leaders are taken out. They're different than Hezbollah, where Hezbollah actually, honors their quote unquote martyrs. Hamas keeps it under wraps. Reason number one. Reason number two is that the first story that came out was condemning Israel for killing the negotiation team, saying Israel doesn't want peace. That was the first narrative that came out. Then it shifted all of a sudden to being they're all alive and well. Then there was that viral photo of Al-Khalil in a doctor's bed throwing up the peace sign saying that he's still alive. Turns out that photo's from 2021 and him at a dentist. Then you have this morning the report from, I believe it was a Turkish news outlet, saying that they all escaped because they all went for prayer, but they left their phones behind, and that's why Israel thought they were still there. And now you have a new Saudi report saying that they were injured, but they were still there. So I just don't believe all the noise. I don't believe all these different conflicting reports. The only thing we know is that Israel has a history of targeted strikes where they don't miss. And so I think a combination of all that together. I think these viral lies aren't organic. I think they're coming from somewhere. And I think when you have so many different viral lies, the whole purpose is to confuse us and think that they're not alive. They are alive, which leads me to believe that they aren't alive. And if they were alive and well, why not just make a public appearance exactly? Why not just say I'm alive or something like that?
Yeah, I think quite a bit of the disinformation of like England being taken over, Europe being taken over, America being taken over, is in fact propaganda from those very countries, not only to divide us, but to make us think to give up, to just not get involved, to just give up. And another reason, to inspire people to conquer our country, in particular the Green Red Alliance. You've been dealing with quite a bit of, I think, Pakistani bot farms. I remember once you and I on X, you were saying something about you were getting focused by bot farms, and you had a large amount come from like, what country was it?
It moves. It's cyclical. It's 1 week it'll be Pakistan, another Turkey, another Saudi Arabia, another Nigeria.
Why do you think? For people who don't understand what's going on.
Basically, you can see on X your audience, and you can break it down by likes, reposts, comments, impressions, profile visits. And so when I see 0% of my likes coming from Saudi Arabia, but then 12% of my profile visits coming from Saudi Arabia, and my content is suppressed, there's no other reason why so many people would just be visiting my profile. Same thing with Turkey, same thing with Nigeria, same thing with Pakistan. There's only one reason we're talking thousands of people going to my profile and not interacting at all, not putting an impression, even commenting something negative on my post. That's obvious algorithmic manipulation.
Yeah, I think Nick Fuentes has a lot of manipulation on his algorithm. I think, because if you look at his tweets, man, he's getting incredible engagement very, very fast.
I mean, it's proven that Nick Fuentes' accounts are boosted. There's been multiple reports that prove that a lot of his engagement is fake, and I'm not talking, 10% is fake. I'm talking, there's reports that say it's 90% fake. And I think the easiest way to see it is if you go to one of his posts or his comments on someone else's post. There was a viral photo that Nick Fuentes had 1,000 likes on a post that only had 900 views. Yeah. That's literally mathematically impossible. And so, look, if you need to win by paying for fake engagement, then that's how we'll play the game.
Yeah, the thing is, they use the bot farm. Nick has bot farms, or his friends do. Someone does that's backing him. And if you speak up against them, they will shame you. They will bully you.
They all attack you.
They'll attack you.
Yeah.
And he sort of worked his way up the ladder by using manipulation of our social media. Would you say there's a country you think that's supporting him? Like in a few years, in 5 years, do you think there's one country that'll come out that, yeah, they were supporting him?
I don't think Nick Fuentes. I think Nick Fuentes is just a white nationalist that hates any group that's not his, and is to an extent very immature, that he thinks just degrading people is funny, which is a very high school, middle school-y thing to do. But some of the other people, I mean, definitely supported by foreign actors.
You got a chance to meet Trump. How was he?
He was good. I would say when people ask me that, I say he's just the same as he is in person, as he is, he's giving a speech or in any of these videos. He kind of lights up the room. He's hilarious. He's always cracking jokes. And he's very personable. Like, he doesn't act aloof. He doesn't act like he's better than you. He gives you the chance to speak, which is very rare, I feel like, for someone who's, the president of the United States. And I mean, I don't think I've ever, I didn't meet him. I didn't speak to him for that long. Obviously, he's very busy. But whenever I go to any of his speeches or private events, I don't think I laugh more during those than I do during stand-up comedy bits of professional comedians. So maybe after, running one of the biggest real estate empires in the world and being president, maybe he's got a career in stand-up comedy after.
Yeah. I met him not far from here on 575 Madison Avenue, right across the street from Trump Tower. I worked at a real estate office that my friend Nick was actually the videographer. He put me in touch with a broker there, Whitney Didier. I would go there for lunch. And I got to know quite a bit of the staff. This is before he became president. And that's when I met Trump. And I told him, I'm reading your book, Art of the Deal. And he was like, he said something to me. He said it with such confidence. He looked at me in my eyes. He was like, you're going to make a lot of money. He said something like that. He's like, good, you're reading that book.
That's awesome.
And at the time, I had I was poor, and I was in the Lower East Side with two girls sharing an apartment. So, listen, man, it's been a pleasure. Where could everyone find you on social media to subscribe to your pages?
On social media, on my X, which is at Yakoby, EYAKOBY, and my Instagram, which is just my first and last name, Eyal Yakoby.
Okay, and then there's one last question here. To Americans that are Christian and they're seeing all the these propaganda videos of Christians getting spit on by Israelis. As an Israeli American, would you say that they should just go and visit and that they would have a good trip? Or would you say that let me rephrase that. How do you feel about Christians who support Israel?
The same way I feel about Christians who don't support Israel as our brothers and sisters. If you read any piece of history about this country, was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Jews and Christians have, been aligned in this country literally since its founding. I don't think people know this. Samuel Adams literally wanted the language of the United States of America to be Hebrew. Alexander Hamilton was studying Hebrew at the time. I mean, the amount of history that's woven into one in this country specifically is incredible, and I encourage anyone to learn more about that. And then in terms of, anyone who doesn't support Israel because they watch videos online or they read an article or whatever it might be, I think that whole narrative, I think the people who post those videos and post overall the propaganda, I think they're building a building that is eventually they're going to jump off of, because when you lie to someone so much, all it takes is that person recognizing one lie that you've told them and the whole building comes crashing down. And so when you're being fed that many lies with no room for disagreement or error, you're just walking off a cliff at that point. And so it might seem bad that all these people have fallen for the propaganda, but we've seen time and time again throughout history that people fall for propaganda, and then eventually once they wake up, they don't feel too great about themselves. So my biggest, advice to anyone is there's going to come a day of reckoning. You have to ask yourself, were you educated? Did you fall for the lies? Or did you think for yourself? Did you do your own research? Did you actually take into consideration everything? Did you consider who's feeding you the information? And, I'll feel good about myself, and we'll see how they feel about themselves.
All right. Yeah. I mean, the simplest thing I like to tell people is, hey, go talk to someone who's actually visited Israel. Talk to someone at your church who's visited Israel. Talk to a friend that's actually been to Israel. Don't believe these bots online. Because offline, it's a whole other story than what you hear online. But anyway, man, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.